Comic Book Savant, episode 441. Welcome back to the Comic Book Savant. I'm your host, James Harris. This episode, I wanted to discuss the impact or the after effect that the comic book movies have had on the comic book industry. But before we get into all that, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my friends over at the Comics Podcast Network. You can find them over at comicspodcast.com. If you like what I do here and you want to find more comic book related content, you can head over to the site. It is basically a one-stop shop for comic book related podcasts and shows. They have everything listed from podcasts on single individual characters to teams to actual publishers as well. So it's a great resource if you're looking for more comic book related podcasts or shows to listen to or watch. It's a one-stop shop that you can partake upon finding more content. Again, you can find them over at comicspodcast.com. And it's also a great resource if you're inspiring or just starting up as a comic book podcaster. You can email the administrator on the site as well to see about getting your show added to the network to help you build your audience. That was, the main reason why we all came together early on years ago to create the Comics Podcast Network to help promote one another. And to get more eyes on our shows and sharing audiences. So if you're, inquiring or thinking about starting a comic book podcast, you might also want to use that as a secondary resource to help find or grow your audience. But with all that being said, let's head back to the main topic of the after effect of comic book movies on the comic book industry. And one thing that I've noticed as a positive that people kind of have glossed over is I think it's some positives. We always talk about sometimes the negatives or look at the negative side of what I want to call the after effect. A lot of the comic book movies that we're getting are based upon really old classic comics that are now being reprinted. We're seeing more collections probably than ever because the desire for people to come from the movies to then want to read the source material is great. And even though the MCU, they use a lot of, historical or classic comic book stories and they will adapt them to film. They'll make changes, accordingly to fit the motion pictures. But the great thing is they always will quote like Infinity War was based upon, the Infinity Gauntlet. So it prompted someone like myself that had never had a chance to read the Infinity Gauntlet to go back and read that before that movie in anticipation. So it's really great. I feel like it's been a great thing for the industry because now the companies are investing in these books that haven't been that were collected in trade or in hardcover format years ago that had been out of print for years. We're seeing these books in new packages and new printings of these books now come about, which, if you were, a comic book collector, to get those books we know would be, especially the Silver and Golden Age books, they can be quite pricey to get those issues. So through, I feel like it's been a real shot in the arm to the industry far as is concerned where we get more, the market is growing out when it comes especially to like collected editions. We've seen a big boom. I even talked about this a few episodes back when I was talking about the report that came out, stating that we're actually not the the comic book industry is not decreasing, it's actually increasing. But again, the market channels that are being boosted aren't maybe always the excuse me, the local comic book shops, but we're having situations where the book market is growing. The actual market of Kickstarter and things like that are growing, where creators are getting supported by the fans to do these creator-owned books that they want to do. We're seeing booms in those channels more so the traditional sense of the your local comic book store. So it's other venues. So that's where we're really seeing a boom. I mean, a perfect example of this is with a character like Black Widow. We do know now, when Marvel released their slate, that a Black Widow movie is coming on the horizon. Now, because of that, a lot of Black Widow stuff has been very loosely collected over the years. They've already solicited a Black Widow omnibus that with all her first appearances and things like that early on, her Silver Age stuff that are being collected that I haven't ever seen in my time, those books being collected. She's getting an all new omnibus. A lot of her miniseries that she's had, especially in the early 2000s, it was a lot of miniseries that came out that were hard to find in collected edition. Now all of those books are getting pushed to be printed because that character's about to have the spotlight in her own solo film. So that has helped. Another example that I spoke on before is Nightwing. Nightwing is, Dick Grayson is one of my favorite characters in the DC universe. Well, because of this new initiative, and you're seeing this boom in interest in comic books, now DC went back. Those trades, the original Nightwing trades, especially for the volume 1 book of Nightwing, which I think ran into the I don't know if it made it up to 200 as far as the original volume of it before they rebooted the series, but those trades were expensive even at the time because they had such low print runs. They easily sold anywhere from $30 to $50 per trade on eBay, and trust me, I know because I was a huge fan. I paid the upwards of $30 to $40 for some of those trades because you could not find them in any retail outlet, online, in local stores. They were super rare to get your hands on, so you had to pay quite a bit to get those things. Now it's interesting. Now, in the past year, you're seeing those books were repackaged and mapped differently, and the first 6 to 7, trades have been repackaged in some form with additional materials in them, and they've been printing regularly. We've seen a big push in Wonder Woman. She's been a big fixture in the DC Universe Expanded Universe, or whatever they're calling their cinematic universe. She's become popular since her solo movie. They've produced a whole line of writer series of Wonder Woman by Greg Rucka, by John Byrne, by George Perez. Those books have been pushed heavily, and I feel that it has to do because of the movies and the popularity that these characters that have been spotlighted in movies or become fan favorites, that people are wanting to seek out those the stories that made this character so great. So you're seeing a boom in these collected editions, and you see other things too, like the comic book companies, based on the movies and the cartoons and the TV shows and all that, are trying to appeal to grander audiences. So you're seeing things that DC has done in the past year to 2 years, where they created multiple different imprints. They have the Earth One imprint that they do that original graphic novel series spotlighting characters, bringing on top talent to do retellings and of origins and so forth. That has been really successful for them. They've done Black Label, which has been their most successful. I think San Diego last year of 2018, they announced Black Label, Wonder Comics, Inc., Zoom, a lot of different imprints under the DC umbrella. They didn't do nearly as well, and they shut down certain imprints. They retired the Vertigo imprint, which was their creator owned imprint that they ran for many years. They officially shut that down, and they're kind of switching their philosophy. Where they're going in the future, far as their imprints, where they're kind of condensing them down. Black Label was really successful for them, so they're doing more adult, mature content there. Where Zoom and Ink kind of took off, and they're doing their own thing there, because that's the more young adult, kid focused books. They're still doing that as well. That actually did the opposite of Vertigo. Vertigo kind of floundered with their reimagining, relaunching with the Books of Magic, the Neil Gaiman stuff, Sandman and Books of Magic, different series that they launched about a year ago. But now you're seeing the Wonder Comics imprint that a book like Naomi has taken off and caught people by surprise, and how people have received that. And I think that's really like they have Naomi, they have Wonder Twins, they have what other books that are coming out? Young Justice. So they're doing, those imprints are doing well, and they're appealing to different age groups outside of our core demographic, which for myself, a 43-year-old male, like I'm not the core demographic for these, and I'm glad that I'm not. It doesn't make these books any less fun to read, or I shun them because I'm not the target demographic. I just enjoy comics in general, and I think we all do. But it's very fascinating to see how these shifts have really came, and I think has bolstered the comic book industry. And I don't think it's talked about nearly as much as it should be, because of this. I think it has been a real positive effect. Now, do I think more can be done? Sure. I'm a big proponent, and I've voiced my opinion on this multiple times, that I would love to see more of these books released digitally, especially when it comes to collected editions. Collected editions have taken on a whole life of itself and really dominating the sales and book channel of the sales diagram. When you look at the whole layout from that report, that is growing at a really high clip. So I would like to see things that the companies also including all these collected editions that are being pushed out, and that they include it just like they do in the single issues, codes for omnibuses, for trades, that when you buy trades, you can get that digitally. And I like it multiple fold in the way of I'm not a physical comic collector anymore. I love to read the comics, go back and revisit them. I'm a passionate comic fan, and it's more about reading and less about collecting to me personally. So I would like that, hey, if it was a good deal and I could buy physical trades, that then for me, because I do a podcast and say I wanted to do giveaways, I could buy a trade and be like, boom, here, I redeem the digital code, I pay it forward back to the community, then I give away that physical copy for the people that do collect physical comics. I would like more things like that. Like whenever I do giveaways and things like that, or someone donates a comic, if it has a digital code, that's all that I just want to be able to read, discuss, and review the book, and enjoy it for what it is, for what it is in the form of just consuming the media, so I can discuss it and express my feelings on it. I don't need to have it sitting on the shelf. Plus, I just don't have the room for it. If you guys have gone to the YouTube channel at all, a few months back, I did a room tour showing like what my setup looks like. If you saw it then, it's not the biggest space. That my office that I work at, my studio and everything that I record out of, is not a huge room. So I really don't have anywhere that I could really, unless I would put my comics in a closet, which again, I always loved having like the bookshelves with the collected editions and trades and hardcovers where I could just see the spines and have a library feel where I could pick something off the shelf and, you know, take it and read it. So it's so interesting, and not just the collected editions that are booming. Digital comics are on the rise. I mean, I know for certain people it could be a sore subject when it comes to, you know, collected editions and if they like them or not. I feel like, but it's growing because I see a lot from, not so much here from feedback, but feedback I get from the YouTube channel. And I have a lot of more, as far as people that are in my comments that vocalize their thoughts. I have a lot of international viewers on YouTube that express that digital is a lot of times the cheapest way and the quickest way for them to get books and to stay current with comic books. They can't order them, but again, mostly if not all the major publishers, as far as American comics, are, you know, here in America. So for them, if they order comics, they have to, you know, order through an American-based site online. Then they have to, you know, wait literally at times weeks or maybe even months because they have to pay a ton for shipping. Then they have to worry about books clearing customs. And it could take them forever for just the simplest, you know, order online for physical comics to get, and the amount that they're paying. Subscription services such as, you know, DC Universe or Marvel Unlimited or even Comixology Unlimited, that those services are lifesavers for people that don't have regular access. And I feel like as a comic community, that's definitely something we have to talk about more. It is a whole huge segment. It is not, you know, we tend to think about stuff in just the scale of how it affects us here in our country, but it's comic fans all over the world that it has become increasingly harder for them to get books. And that's why these other channels are kind of opening up some, where they're growing, they're helping grow the industry and keep the industry alive. We might discount them because we like physical books. A lot of people like physical books, but digital is one way that really helps fans outside of the U.S. stay connected to the comic book hobby, and things like YouTube and podcasts, and, you know, and hearing thoughts, and you know, for them, that's the one way that that makes the world a lot smaller place. And I think it's something that, I mean, even me as a podcaster, for podcasting as long as I have, that was something I feel like I took for granted for most of my early years, because, you know, as a content creator, especially as something like a podcaster, where you're sitting and you're, you know, you're in a room by yourself talking to a microphone, that you don't realize how, with the internet being the way it is that it can make this huge world a lot smaller and connect like-minded people together so closely. That I didn't think about that impact of that. You know, once I put it on the internet, anyone that, you know, if they live halfway across the world, they can find it on iTunes or on any, you know, podcasting service and search for my podcast and find it. And literally that means anyone, anywhere could listen to it. And I didn't realize the impact till I start getting more and more feedback. And, you know, it goes into the things like, the Facebook group as well, that, you know, I get to know each one of you guys so much on a personal level because of our conversations, and like things we talk about, you know, it's not always about comics. Sometimes it's things about, we talk about things, real life issues, and it helps us get to know one another better, you know, as well. And we're building a community, and we also are building friendships there, which I think is a fantastic thing about this world that we live in now, and having things like podcasts and, you know, internet, that we can share in this hobby together, even though we're not in the same towns or in the same countries even, that we still share this hobby that we all know and love so much with one another. And we're so open to one another It's no discrimination, or anything like that, which is so vital because with all the things that have been going on recently here in the U.S. and even in other countries, with discrimination against people, and people are losing their lives because of the color of their skin or their religious preferences, that especially in the Savant society, that's the only thing I can really speak on, because that's the only community that I interact with on a daily basis is my own. That it's not even my own, it's ours. So it's the community that we built together, that we get to talk about those things, and we don't do things. It's something I don't think about, and it's kind of cool how we've come together. And I appreciate everyone that has been joining the Facebook group and sharing their comic book experiences and getting to know people and being open and starting great conversations. Like, if you've listened or you're listening to this podcast and you haven't done it yet, I implore you to go over to Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/the Savant Society, all one word. Request to join. I will add you onto the group. It's been such a positive experience, and it's been growing, week after week, month after month. More and more people are coming to join. I think, maybe a few months ago, before I really start putting it out there to you guys, it might have been less than 20. We've jumped from 20 to, we're, about 35, 36. More and more people are coming every day to join in and join into the conversation of comics and just, and building friendships and relationships, which, again, I value more so than anything else. Like I said, it's just such a funny world that we live in. And, going back to the main topic of like this After Effects, I took some notes from the report that I spoke on, that was showing the numbers from 2018. And it's crazy that, I just want to read this out to you guys. They're like, sales in the book channel, which includes chain bookstores, mass merchants, major online retailers, and scholastic book fairs, were up by double digits, with sales of kids' graphic novels the biggest factor. Digital sales were also up for the first time in several years, with increased title counts across multiple platforms a factor. Sales in comic stores were down very slightly versus the previous year. So again, you're looking at that, and it just, again, you hear a lot of things from the local comic book stores, but I feel like it's this weird evolution because it's so much of a market to be made online. So if you're a local comic shop and you're not opening yourself up to like online sales, online marketing, like doing a podcast, all those things can help people find your shop to help you survive. That's why I feel like it's really an evolution now, that you have to evolve or you're going to die. You're going to get gobbled up by these other platforms and avenues that people are getting really inventive and really growing out the fandom or reaching out to fans. There's a ton of fans online that don't know where to go to buy books or how to go about it. So many of you guys have come to me and said, because I mentioned it in stock trades, they never heard of it, or a discount comic book service, or comics didn't know about Comixology, the website, or Comixology Unlimited, or Marvel Unlimited. Those things, we have to talk about, because it opens up so much for others to be able to get their hands on comics, and we can't keep discounting them. We have to embrace them, even though if it might not be our personal preference. If we know someone that's interested in comics and are a fan of comics but can't get them in a traditional manner, we need to be versed in knowing these things to be like, to help grow the industry. Be like, hey, okay, well, it's hard for you to get comics. Maybe you want to try, like, if you're a Marvel fan, hey, try, Marvel Unlimited. It's their subscription service. You can read comics, from your computer, your phone, or your tablet device. Same thing with Comixology. Like, push those out there, saying maybe, well, if you can't get physical comics, maybe here are some alternatives, for you. And another little note here was that's really good, that's really telling too, is that sales of all three formats, comics, graphic novels, and digital, grew in 2018, with graphic novels leading the way, followed by some distance, digital and physical comics. And, that's telling, because even as fans now, books are double publishing, double shipping each month. It's harder and harder to keep up with monthly books, especially at their price point of what? Some are $3.99. Now we're getting books now, I'm seeing even like director's cut editions retailing for like $5 and $6.99. That's relatively expensive when you can get a trade of the first 5 or 6 issues pretty much discounted around the same cost in a lot of ways. Like if you use a online retailer like an in-stock trades, you get 45% or so off. You're paying what, $10 or $8 sometimes for certain trades, and you're paying, $3.99 or, it's like $6 or $5.99 for one issue. So like it's becoming more cost effective, and other people too. And I found this being more so on how my personal reading habits have changed recently, that I rather sit, even though digitally I can have the individual issues, it's been more cost effective for me to stretch my budget on buying trades and just waiting for those trades to go on sale and buy them. And then it's the same thing of, flipping through 6 individual issues, even though it's not a much of a hassle with digital comics. But I found myself, I'd rather just read it like I'm reading a book, a digital book I'm reading it from the front cover to the end cover, and I'm getting all one story or all one arc in that, and then I could go to the next book and the next book. So I've been shifting more, even in my digital, to more trade editions than individual issues. Now, I will still buy individual comic issues, and a lot of times it's based on money. It's a lot of times, like I spoke on this before. Also, too, you guys, I want to say this too as well. If you listen to the show and you have not thought about consider being a Patreon, please check out the Patreon, because I do a podcast there on the Patreon. If you contribute at the lowest tier, which is just $1 a month, again, I'm not doing it to get rich or make money. Every single cent that I get from you guys, from donations or anything you guys, contribute to the show, it goes into buying comics. It goes into paying the podcast host monthly, or, I put it something towards the show or to equipment to better the videos or better the audio quality. That if you just contribute to that $1, you get the Savant Extra podcast feed. And I do a thing where I do totally different content. It's still comic book related, but I do things like I do a monthly comic book haul episode. I do the DC animated films. I do the reviews for those. Those are mainly done on that feed. So even if you can't contribute a ton, I don't do it to make money. I just do it to give you guys additional content for you helping me with the show. So, if you can contribute to that $1 tier, you get the extra Savant Extra podcast there. And I do the comic book hauls where I talk about the books that I buy every month. And like I said, I just did an episode recently where I discussed about, it was a huge sale on Comixology where individual issues were, with my discount, I think 84 cents. They were 99 cents, but because of my discount I have is being subscribed to Comixology Unlimited, it ended up being only 84 cents an issue. So I picked up a ton of single issues, because 84 cents an issue, you can't pass that up. And it was a lot of current books that I was able to get at that. Those trades aren't even out yet. And and because the books are double shipping, I could get caught up in a series. Excuse me, I can get caught up in a series relatively quickly by buying that bundle. But in most cases, when you don't have those sales, I will buy the collected editions. And normally, for me, digitally, collected editions can run, when I find them online, I could find them for anywhere as low as $2.54 to as much as regular trades $5.09, I think. And then you can get things like the Epic collections from anywhere from the $6 range all the way up to around $10. Because I will buy the IDW Ultimate Editions of like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers. They only do them for certain books. Excuse me, but I will pick those up as well because those are like they're oversized. The actual physical print are large, and they collect 12 plus issues in them. So I will pick those up, and they normally run about $9.99 before tax. In the Epic collections, I've picked up a ton of the Epic collections, so those will range anywhere from in that ballpark. Like I said, standard trades $250 to around $509, and then the bigger editions will then scale up to that $5 to $10 range, which is still way cheaper. So those avenues are becoming very vital for me to be able to get the comics that I need and be able to read and review those things. It's been a blessing because I don't personally have the money to be able to buy physical comics at that clip I once did years ago. So I have to improvise the best way possible, and I feel like that's a lot of what we have to do as comic fans is do the best we can. I don't think a lot of people have $150, $200 dollars of disposable income to just spend on comics every month, and then you got a bag and board, you got to have long boxes, so that can eat up a ton of money. And like I said, I've been on both sides, so I know firsthand that it can get just bags and boards and long boxes. You can spend $200 easily in a month getting the supplies you need to make sure your comic book collection is even protected accordingly. So again, it's so many different angles of this that we're looking at. But I feel like as much as people can side on the negative side that that the comic book movies have had, now we feel like more so that the movies are dictating what's happening in the comics instead of the comics being a guideline what happens in the movies. It's kind of flipped, and now it's a testing ground. Comics have become a testing ground for what they might produce into film. But I feel like, again, for those things, be it positive or negative, how you look at it, I feel like the effect that it's had on making more books that weren't once available to us, growing out the different individual channels and understanding why those channels are vital to the continued success of the comic book industry as a whole. Like I said, we all become attached to local comic book shops. Because of local comic book shops, I'm probably doing this show today. Because they were like, hey, if you try this book, if you don't like it, you can bring it back to me. I'll give you a refund. And I tried it, and I ended up loving it. And it led me down a journey. So, you can't have one without the other, but I do feel like it's the responsibilities of the local comic book shop owners to become creative in how they market themselves and portray themselves. It's free tools like podcasting. It is some expense because if you need a podcast host, but it's minimal if you're already a business owner to get that started. It's very, that's why everyone's jumping on podcasting so much nowadays. You're seeing every celebrity. It's low, relatively startup costs. All you need is a microphone, a podcast hosting company, and, a website, so it's minimal. You can start a podcast easily for, I would say, I started with a stick microphone and free software on my computer. So starting up this podcast was like less than $50, I guess, if you look at everything I spent at that moment in time to do the show. I had a stick microphone that I got from Office Depot for like $10 or $15. I started the podcast hosting, which is Libsyn, which is the company I still use now, which was, I think, like $15 or $20 a month, I think, at the time. The software I was using to record and edit the podcast on was Audacity, which was a free open source software that I was using. And securing my domain name, which was another like 10 or so bucks. So around about $50, $60, you can easily start, a podcast. And again, so I feel like you at least nowadays, if like your comic book, local comic book shop, that you can, do that to promote yourself, promote what books are coming up, to buy what specials they have, things like that. You can use them as a marketing tool to help your shop. And I feel like some do it. I know like the old comic book shop in North Carolina that I used to go to when I lived in the Greensboro area, Acme Comics, they started doing a podcast and doing that way. And they're one of the most successful ones in comic book shops in North Carolina because of it. They've been spotlighted, in different publications about being one of the best comic shops in the state of North Carolina. It's because, they're huge comic book fans, and they saw the wave of what podcasting was doing, and they got on board with that, and it has helped their store to continue to grow, tremendously. So it's like, we have to look at that as well. We can't blame everything on the motion picture industry. Yes, we're seeing now almost a ton of comic book movies, the successful ones, the Marvel ones now, even unexpected ones like Captain Marvel, they're billion dollar hits now. So it's a $1 billion industry, and the comic book industry is a $1 billion industry. Like I said, this report proves it. But again, things can be manipulated different ways. But it's so interesting to see now the phenomenal growth that is pouring into it. But it's just in channels that we're not as familiar with, like I said, with bookstores and mass merchants and online retailers. That's a whole thing out of our realm, because most of us, we could go to our corner comic book shop, walk in, buy some comics. And it's so funny. And I was like, at some point I want to do a video. I literally live across the street from one of the bigger comic shops in the Houston area. I'm in Houston, Texas, Bedrock Comics, if I remember correctly. One of their locations is literally kind of walking distance from me. It's like right across the street, around the corner from me. And I have not been in that shop not one time, because again, for me, it's just a lot easier for me to just get comics digitally. And for so long, until I moved here, I was nowhere near a comic book shop. But where I live at now, it's fortunate that it's literally one very close, but I haven't stepped foot into it yet, which I want to do something, and maybe I will shoot a video for the YouTube channel about the shop, and maybe go in there and pick up some stuff for some giveaways or whatnot. But that's all I really have for you guys for this episode. I wanted to kind of like drill down on this more and kind of just what I have seen. I saw those excerpts from the report talking about those other channels that books are bought from and how those are actually booming. And looking at those things, I was like, and just the realization, we're seeing more and more books and more collections. Like when Aquaman came out, we were flooded with a lot of Aquaman stuff that hadn't been collected in years, if ever. And that helps, because now it gives us an avenue to get those books cheaper, because we, if you can't afford finding those silver and golden age books, you can get these reprinted collections nowadays and still read origins of characters that they were super hard to obtain previously, which I feel like is such a positive thing for us as comic fans and for the industry as well. So I think we have to, keep those things in consideration. But with all that being said, that's all I really have. Like I said before, I tried to do the Amazon affiliate thing again. I didn't qualify for it, and I just figure like at this point, I don't do this to make money or try to get rich. I do this because I love it. I love you guys. You guys have become family to me. You've been, so supportive of me, and me trying to grow this as much as possible. I used it as an avenue to help generate revenue to put back into Comic Book Savant. It was just a weird thing. I'm not a salesperson. I never try to be a salesman. I suck at it. I've applied, I don't even know, 5, 6, 7 times to become an Amazon affiliate. I got a few sales. I didn't get enough to, air quotes, qualify. So what I'm just going to do, it's not really for me. All I ask from you guys is to keep supporting in any way you can. again, the Amazon affiliate thing just didn't work out. I never felt comfortable doing it. I'm just going to tell you guys, if you can, like I said, just $1 a month. You get extra content based upon that $1 a month you contribute. If you can, do go to patreon.com/Comic Book Savant. You'll have the pages. You'll see the different tiers. But like I said, for as little as $1 a month, you get access, to the Comic Book Savant extra podcast feed. So instead of getting like 4 episodes you get here, you get a whole another 4. So you get 8 episodes. And again, it's different content. So it's not me recycling anything you've heard here. It's all new, different content that I cover, different stuff and I do reviews there as well. So certain reviews might be there that won't show up here, but it's all exclusive content to that feed. So definitely check that out. Like I said, a little as $1 a month gets you that access to that feed. Also, I have the Teespring store. You can hit that up if you can afford it. The t-shirts are about $20. So I have a couple of designs. I have one for the Savant Society, the one with the actual Comic Book Savant logo on it as well. I got some new designs that are going to be coming in a few months, but you can get these shirts now. These shirts are still going to be available for the time being. Once I get some new designs, I probably will swap those out in favor of the new designs. Or you can always do a one-time donation. I have a donate button or whatever on the website where you can check that out. You can send a one-time donation through like PayPal if you don't want to commit to something long-term. Like Patreon. And with Patreon, you can cancel at any time. So it's not like something that you got to sign up for. And it's like you're subscribing to me for a year. You can subscribe to check out, the Patreon and how you like it. And you can either go up in tier or go down or cancel it at any point in time. So that's just something for you guys to think about. If not, just keep spreading the love. If you can't afford it, I understand it. It is not a requirement. It's only if you want to help support the show. You can also do it by joining the Facebook group. Like I stated earlier, it is facebook.com/groups/the Savant Society, all one word. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is at Comic Book Savant, or over on Instagram at Comic Book Savant as well. Those, retweets and all that kind of stuff helps me a ton as well. So again, it's ways you can help monetarily. It's ways that you can support me in, following me on those social network channels and retweeting and liking, the content I put out there as well. So it's many different ways to help. Again, it's not a requirement. It's just like anything you can do helps a ton. So I appreciate you guys for everything that you've done. And again, that's all I have for you guys for this episode. I'm your host, James Harris. This is the Comic Book Savant podcast. And until next week, I will talk to you guys later, and you guys be safe, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.